Good evening, everybody. Today we have a live session being presented by Dr. Kavita. She is a MDDM Assistant Professor from St. John's, Bangalore, and her topic is PAP therapy for sleep related breathing disorders. Ma'am, I welcome you for today's session. You may take over.
Thank you, Dr. Deepthi. Good evening, everyone. Last month we had a session on polysomnography. So we thought we'll have another session completing the last month's session, which includes the therapeutic part of it, because we were not able to cover the therapy part of it in the last session. So today I'll be dealing with PAP therapy, which will include these topics: whom to treat, the PAP devices that are available, CPAP titration, how to do that, follow up of patients on PAP therapy, how to choose the device and the interface in a patient, and other modalities of therapy, a brief mention of the other modalities. So, why do we treat OSA? It is important to treat OSA because of the consequences that can occur due to OSA, which we all are familiar with. I'll just name them. I will not go into the details of them due to time crunch. So, neurocognitive consequences, cardiovascular consequences, we are all aware: increased risk of MI, increased risk of cerebrovascular accidents, also metabolic consequences, worsening of hyperglycemia and hypertension, and excessive daytime somnolence, which is the most common symptom that the patient may come to you with and may lead to grave consequences like motor vehicle accidents. So, to prevent these consequences, we want to treat patients with OSA. But do we treat each and every patient with OSA? So, whom do we treat? First and foremost would be patients with moderate to severe OSA, that is AHI more than 15 or more than 30. In milder OSA or in patients who don't fit into moderate to severe category, also you may decide to treat OSA if the patient has symptoms like excessive daytime sleepiness, impaired quality of life because of excessive daytime sleepiness or his OSA, and if the patient has comorbid hypertension. Only comorbid hypertension is mentioned as a category to treat OSA because in studies and evidence shows that treatment of OSA will modify only hypertension as of now. Whether treatment of OSA with CPAP therapy will modify neurocognitive consequences and other consequences is not yet proven. The evidence is not strong, though there is evidence that it does improve neurocognitive consequences and metabolic consequences also. But the major indications to treat OSA would be comorbid hypertension or symptomatic patient with excessive daytime sleepiness or moderate to severe OSA. So, how does CPAP work? This is very basic. There are multiple modalities with which CPAP will work, but whatever is the basic is, as we all know, OSA is because of uh, compromise or the uh, choking of the airway because of uh, increased soft tissue in the nasopharynx and the oropharynx. So, what we need to do by giving them a PAP therapy, positive airway pressure therapy, the positive pressure that is rendered by the PAP device will act as a pneumatic splint. It prevents the collapse of the airways that happens during snoring or during apneic and hypopneic episodes. So, because of the pneumatic splint effect, it keeps the airway open and prevents the collapse, thus preventing the hypoxias and the hypopneas and apneas also. So, this is one of the basic mechanisms with which CPAP would work, though there are many other mechanisms also. So, what constitutes a PAP device? Most of the PAP devices will have a flow generator, which is inside the main PAP device itself, which creates the airflow. It may be due to a fan, using a fan or a turbine. A patient interface, which you have to choose wisely in patients. Most of the times, what we use would be a nasal mask, but oronasal mask can also be used. And now there are multiple interfaces that can be used, which are more comfortable to the patient, like a nasal pillow and other interfaces. The tubing which connects the mask to the device, usually it is 6 to 8 feet long, and some accessories you may choose to add, like a humidifier. We will see whether these accessories are required in every patient or not. So before going into CPAP titration per se and therapy, we should know the PAP jargon, what we call, because there are a lot of ABCDs here. So we should know what each of them means and how each of them differs from CPAP, which is the basic treatment modality for obstructive sleep apnea. So we have CPAP, we have BiPAP or BPAP, bi-level positive airway pressure. We have auto titrating PAP. We have C-flex or B-flex. We have adaptive servo ventilation, and we have volume assured pressure support. These are some of the basic PAP devices that are used for treatment of OSA. We'll see very briefly as to how these devices work and how they differ from the normal CPAP. We will not go into too much details of the ventilatory aspects, but whatever basics you need to know, I'll be covering. So as you can see, this is the pressure and this is the breathing, that is inspiration and expiration. In a normal CPAP, that is continuous positive airway pressure, the airway pressure throughout the inspiration and the expiration will remain at the same level. Suppose I set a CPAP of 8 or 10 centimeters. Throughout inspiration and expiration, there is no change in the pressure that the device is providing to the patient, and it will remain at 8 or 10 centimeters. However, a BiPAP will have two different pressures, that is inspiratory pressure and an expiratory pressure. Expiratory pressure is similar to your CPAP, and inspiratory pressure is higher than the expiratory pressure. You decide what is the difference between the two based on your titration and patient's requirements, patient's carbon dioxide levels, and minute ventilation, whatever targets you want to achieve. So IPAP, and during expiration, there is a dip in the pressure, that is the EPAP. So this is your BiPAP. So we know what is CPAP and what is BiPAP now. What is C-flex? It is a modification of the CPAP device, where you can see here that throughout inspiration and expiration, the pressure has to be maintained in a normal CPAP. But in a C-flex, there is a modification where there is a small dip in pressure during expiration. So why is this required? If I am a patient who is getting a very high CPAP pressure, say I am getting 20 centimeters of CPAP, for me to breathe in, it is easier because it is helping me to breathe in with 20 centimeters of positive pressure. But at the same time, if I have to exhale against a pressure of 20 centimeters of water, it may be difficult for me to exhale against so much pressure. So to prevent that difficulty during expiration in very high pressures of CPAP, there is a small release of the CPAP at the beginning of expiration, so that expiration becomes easier for the patient. So this is a modification of the CPAP. Is it useful? Does it improve patient compliance and adherence to therapy? We will see that. Coming to auto CPAP, something that is very, very famous amongst practitioners and very easy to prescribe. Every patient is diagnosed with OSA and prescribed auto CPAP so that it adjusts the pressure on its own. So as the name itself says, it is auto titrating. You don't have to titrate. You can set a range. I can set a minimum PAP and a maximum PAP, and the device will vary the pressure throughout the night based on the patient's requirement. So the pressure changes until adequate patency of the airway is attained. So the pressure goes on increasing till the airway patency is maintained, and then it again starts decreasing till again it uh, identifies airway obstruction. So the pressure will keep varying throughout the night. Is this good or bad is a difficult question to answer, because a lot of studies are happening which have not shown any great benefit with auto titrating CPAP over normal CPAP or a fixed CPAP, what we call it as. And some of the outcomes like renal outcomes and GFR and all, and sympathetic stimulation and all, have been shown to have better outcomes with a fixed CPAP rather than an auto titrating CPAP. It may be because that the pressure will be changing throughout the night and it may not maintain the airway patency as much as the fixed CPAP, and sympathetic stimulation keeps happening despite the patient being on the PAP device because it keeps varying. So this is about auto CPAP. As you can see in this, as the patient's breathing varies, in a fixed CPAP, the pressure remains the same, it does not change, but in an auto CPAP, it modifies the pressure based on the patient's requirements. So again, some people say it is more compliant, the patient is more compliant if you use auto CPAP. Adherence is better if we use auto CPAP, but the evidence is not strong. So based on evidence, if we compare fixed CPAP to auto CPAP, both are equal. A brief mention of ASV and VAPs, which are the newer ventilatory modalities. I will not go into the details, as I said, but we should know what it does different from the traditional CPAP. So adaptive servo ventilation, the target in CPAP, as we saw in the previous slides, the target is to maintain the patency of the airway. That's all. We are not targeting any tidal volume. We don't know how much is the minute ventilation of the patient, whether the patient is breathing enough, whether patient is getting any backup ventilation. We don't know any of that. But in a patient where you need to make sure that the patient is getting enough tidal volume, which are these conditions, we'll see in the future slides. But in a patient where you want to ascertain that a particular tidal volume is being rendered to the patient, these newer modalities may be of use. So in ASV, the target is the percentage of minute ventilation. So what you set on the device will be a patient's ideal body weight and whatever percent of minute ventilation, be it 80%, 90%, most of the times it will be 80 to 90% or 100% of minute ventilation you want to achieve. So once you set the patient's ideal body weight and the percentage of minute ventilation, the device will start giving a few test breaths, and based on the test breaths, it will calculate the patient's lung compliance and expiratory time constants. It may feel a bit confusing or a bit difficult to understand, but what you should remember is that there is minute ventilation that is set, and based on the lung compliance and requirements of the patient, the device itself will decide the respiratory rate and inspiratory expiratory ratio and maintain that minute ventilation. Whereas in a volume assured pressure support, as the name itself suggests, it is volume assured pressure support. So you set the tidal volume. So you have set the tidal volume. That tidal volume will be assured by the machine, and the pressure support will keep varying based on the patient effort. But the tidal volume that you have set will be rendered at whatever pressure support is required. So if the patient is breathing less, the machine will give more pressure support. If the patient is putting in more effort, the pressure support will decrease. So the tidal volume that you have set will be delivered. So these are the basic principles of how the PAP devices will work. So how much pressure do I set? We'll be talking about again the basic fixed CPAP first, and I'll tell you when you should use the other devices in future slides. So how much pressure do I give to a patient? How do I decide that? So for that we need to do something called as a CPAP titration, which will decide the optimal pressure that is required to maintain the patient's upper airway patency. So where do I do the CPAP titration? Should it always be in the lab? Generally, we are used to seeing CPAP titration, manual CPAP titration being done in the lab. So should it always be in the lab, or can I do it with a auto titrating machine at home also? If so, in whom can I do a auto titration at home? So, in a patient with uncomplicated OSA, a patient with pure obstructive sleep apnea who does not have any other comorbidities, we can do a home-based APAP titration. If you're sure that the patient does not have any other comorbidities or any other sleep disorders, you can do a home-based APAP titration where you just apply the APAP auto-titrating PAP device and let the patient sleep throughout the night, and in the next day, or you can use it for a week or a month and see how much is the mean pressure that the patient is requiring and switch over to a fixed CPAP. APAP can also be used as a treatment modality, but if you want to switch to a CPAP, you can do APAP titration and get the mean pressure that the patient requires and switch him to a fixed CPAP. In-lab titration, that is manual CPAP titration, is preferred in patients with comorbidities like heart failure, COPD with OSA, patients in whom you are suspecting hypoventilation syndrome, central sleep apnea patients, and patients who have hypoxia. In these patients, a technician attended in-lab CPAP titration is preferable. Before you start titration, you should always educate the patient about the PAP device and you should check for the mask fitting. Even before you start the patient on titration, you should explain the patient that he is going to get some air with pressure so that he is ready for the therapy, and patient gets used to the mask and all. And after titration, you should always explain to the patients how important it is to be adherent to the therapy, and how to take care of his device, and how to disinfect and clean the device. So should we do a full night titration or a split night titration? This will depend on the patient's severity of the OSA. Every patient with severe OSA, say AHI of 50, 60, AHI of 100 plus patients also we get. So in those patients, you need not waste one whole night in just doing a diagnostic polysomnography and call him again for a titration. So in patients where at least an AHI of 40 per hour has been documented for 2 hours. So you have started a sleep study, you have started a polysomnography, a diagnostic one. In the initial 2 hours, you see that the patient has very severe OSA, and you have seen that the AHI is more than 40. Then you can the technician usually decides that I will do a titration also. I'll convert it into a split night. So in the same night, you can do a diagnostic and titration study. So for that, the patient has to have severe OSA, and you should have at least 3 hours left for your CPAP titration to happen. If you have very limited time for your CPAP titration to happen, then it may be difficult to obtain an optimal titration. We will see what optimal titration is. So you should at least have 3 hours for the CPAP titration, and the patient should have a severe OSA with at least an AHI of 40 documented over 2 hours. Then you can decide to do a split night titration. This we had dealt with in the last class also, just reiterating that. As I said, respiratory signals, we have three transducers for that: nasal thermistor, nasal pressure transducer, and the PAP device flow sensor. So whenever we are doing a CPAP titration, apneas and hypopneas are scored based on the flow sensed by the PAP device. We will not use the thermistor or the nasal pressure transducer signals. We use the flow signal from the PAP device for apnea and hypopnea scoring. So how do we do CPAP titration? We start with a minimum of 4 centimeters. That is 4 centimeter pressure in the CPAP we start. Then we keep looking at the patient's polysomnography. It is a real-time thing. The technician has to sit there and keep seeing for events. So if the patient is having events, that is, if the patient has more than 2 obstructive apneas, more than 3 hypopneas, more than 5 RERAs, or more than 3 minutes of loud snoring, then you increase the pressure. So every 5 minutes, you look for the events. If it qualifies any of these criteria, you increase the pressure by 1 centimeter, or sometimes more at 2 to 3 centimeters. Maximum they say not to increase more than 2.5 centimeters at a time. So you can increase by 1 to 2 centimeters every 5 minutes if the events are going on occurring. So when do you stop that? At least 30 minutes you should have without any respiratory events. That is, without these events, 30 minutes sleep is there without any of these events. Then we stop the titration there, and the patient should have at least 15 minutes of supine REM. That is REM in supine position. So I'll tell you why that is important. So maximum I can go up to 15 to 20 centimeters in CPAP. Suppose I have reached 20 centimeters in a patient on CPAP, but the patient is still continuing to have respiratory events, then I switch over to BiPAP. When I increase the pressures, obviously it is a discomfort for the patient to breathe against a positive pressure. So the patient may wake up. So if the patient wakes up in between when you are increasing the pressures, what do? You go back to a lower pressure, let the patient sleep, and then resume titration. Again, you start increasing. Once you have reached a optimal pressure, that is, there are no events for 30 minutes and patient has had supine REM, you can do something called as a down titration. Not many will do this, but it is recommended. So you start bringing down the pressure again by 1 to 2 centimeters every 10 minutes till you start seeing reappearance of respiratory events. This is because when we do an up titration, we may reach a pressure, say, for example, 12 centimeters. But when I do the down titration, the re-emergence of respiratory events may happen at 10 centimeters. So there is a difference generally when you are doing an up titration. The optimal pressure reached may be a bit higher than what the patient may require. So to attain a lower pressure, which may be enough for the patient to control all events, a down titration should be attempted. So to do all this, you should have enough time to do the CPAP titration. If you have just 1 hour or 1.5 hours, you should not attempt to start CPAP titration at that time. Suppose we decide to go for BiPAP, the titration algorithm is the same. You look for the same events to increase the pressures. You start with a BiPAP pressure of 8 by 4 centimeters, and maximum IPAP you can reach is 30 centimeters. And the algorithm will remain the same. So when do we call it as an optimal titration? Obviously, our goal is to reach this bullseye, that is the optimal pressure. So whenever I do a CPAP titration, as I said, 30 minutes I should have without any events. So at that area where I don't have any events, if I have brought down my RDI to less than 5 per hour and the patient has had 15 minutes of supine REM, then I call it an optimal titration. But this may not be achievable in every patient. So in a patient, you may achieve an RDI of less than 10 per hour or a 50% reduction from the baseline, or the patient may have supine REM, but the RDI may not have reached less than 5 per hour. Then it is called a good titration. That is also acceptable. Sometimes in a patient with very severe OSA, as I said earlier, if the AHI is already more than 100, I cannot expect the AHI to or the RDI to come down to less than 5 per hour in a single night. So in such patients, you may bring down to 75% of the baseline, but the RDI may still be more than 10. So you have not reached less than 5, but it has decreased significantly. It may not decrease beyond that in a single night, and the patient may not have had supine REM. That is called as an adequate titration. All of these are acceptable, but what we should aim at is always an optimal titration. In a very severe OSA patient, it may be very difficult to attain this level in a single night. So adequate titration or a good titration should always be acceptable. So I have done my CPAP titration. I know my pressure. I have prescribed the patient that you should use CPAP at this pressure overnight with using this interface, whatever mask I decide. We'll see the masks later. So how do I follow up this patient? Follow up is very important. So at least the first follow up should happen within a month, then maybe 3 months, then 6 months. And then if the patient is comfortable and good adherence to therapy, his symptoms have resolved on CPAP therapy, you can always follow up once a year after you have made sure that the patient is compliant to therapy. So whenever I call the patient for follow-up, what all do I look at? I look at the CPAP efficacy, how effective my CPAP therapy is, how many hours the patient is using it, how much is the leak, and other flow signals. So important things that you should look at in adherence CPAP usage data. Every CPAP device will have a SD card or a memory card in which the patient's usage will be recorded. Each night's usage will be recorded. You can always download that data and have a look at it for looking at how well the patient is using the device, how compliant the patient is to the treatment. Of course, the most important thing will be a clinical evaluation if the patient's symptoms, especially excessive daytime sleepiness, has improved or not. That is very important, whether the patient's sleep quality has improved or not. Then CPAP usage, as I said, how many hours the patient is using it. At least more than 70% of the nights the patient should have used, and more than 4 hours in the night. If I'm looking at 100 days data, at least 70 days he should have used, and each night he should have used at least for 4 hours. Effectiveness of the CPAP, the AHI, residual AHI on CPAP therapy should be less than 10 per hour, and the mask leak should be minimal. It is at least, less than 1 hour of large leak. Different devices will give you different ways of mask leak interpretation. So some devices will say large leak, it should be less than 1 hour. Some devices may say how much is the leak, so it should be less than 24 to 36 liters per minute. I'll show you one of the usage data of one of our patients. So this shows that the patient has used A-Flex. I showed you C-Flex. Similarly, in a APAP device, that is auto-titrating PAP therapy, if you have the flex phenomenon, that is decrease or a modification, I showed you a small release of the pressure in the expiration, that is called as afflex. So the patient is on auto titrating CPAP. This data is for 30 days. Out of 30 days, the patient has used it for 27 days, which is 90% usage it is showing, which is more than 70%. Our target is 70%. Out of those days, he has used average for more than 4 hours. 4 hours, 6 minutes is his average use on the days that he has used, which is also good. Our target is 4 hours. How much is the leak per day? I told you some devices will show large leak. How much time is the large leak? Which is just 2 minutes and 56 seconds. That means he's wearing his interface very well. There is not much of a leak. Our target was less than 1 hour of a large leak. And our target for residual AHI was less than 10, which is 6.2 in this patient. So I am very happy with the patient and he is using it very well. So if this is an auto titrating CPAP, I will also look at, it is not shown here, but no, it is here. Okay. So mean pressure that the patient is receiving over all these days is 8 centimeters and the maximum that he has received is 10 centimeters. So if I want to shift the patient to a fixed CPAP, I would always shift him at 8 centimeters or 9 centimeters. 8 centimeters should be adequate if that is the mean pressure the patient has been getting throughout these 30 days. So this is a good compliant patient's report. These are all the things that you have to look at when you call the patient for follow-up. So that was about fixed CPAP. And when do we use BiPAP? As I showed in the titration algorithm itself, if a patient has reached the maximum CPAP pressure, that is 20 centimeters, and is still continuing to have respiratory events, then you switch over to BiPAP. And as I told you, if a CPAP pressure is very high, say 15-20 centimeters, the patient may be very uncomfortable. It is very difficult to breathe out, to exhale against such a high pressure. If the patient is very uncomfortable with very high CPAP pressures, then also you may decide to go for a BiPAP, or a C-flex is also an option in such a patient. Auto titrating CPAP, as I said, should not be used for diagnosis and should not be used for split night titration. It may be used for home titration in an uncomplicated OSA, which I mentioned earlier, but not in patients who have any of these comorbidities like heart failure, COPD, hypoventilation syndrome, neuromuscular disorders. If you're suspecting central sleep apnea in a patient or a hypoxic patient, you should not be doing an auto CPAP titration. And auto CPAP can be used for therapeutic purposes also in an uncomplicated OSA patient. But in patients who have these comorbidities, it's always better to do an in-lab manual titration and use a fixed CPAP. Adaptive servo-ventilation was initially in demand for patients with central sleep apnea. That was where it was really used. But can it be used for all central sleep apnea patients? Today, the evidence is against it. The SERVE-HF trial is something that you should remember. It showed that in patients with heart failure with ejection fraction of less than 45%, adaptive servo-ventilation increased mortality in these patients. So ASV now has been, as of now, the evidence is only to use it for central sleep apnea patients in patients with congestive heart failure who have an ejection fraction of more than 45%. In a patient with central sleep apnea with an ejection fraction of less than 45, the evidence is against it as of now. There may be some trials in future which may prove again that it may be useful, but as of now, since this large trial showed that there is increased mortality, it should not be used for patients with ejection fraction of less than 45%. Oral appliances is something that can be used in some patients, but can we use it in all OSA patients? Most of the patients will come and say, I don't want to use CPAP. You give me some medicines, you give me something else. But is it the best therapy for patients with OSA? No. Every patient with OSA, you decide to treat, the best line of management is a CPAP therapy or a PAP therapy. Whatever device you use, fixed CPAP would definitely be the best to start with in any sleep apnea patient. But in some patients in whom there is no OSA, but the patient just has snoring, in them you may try oral appliances. There are multiple appliances. The two different ones that I've put here are the mandibular advancement devices, which will pull the mandible so that the airway patency is maintained. And this is a tongue retaining device where the tongue is pulled into this device and retained inside it so that the tongue doesn't fall and does not compromise the airway. So, oral appliances in patients with only snoring without OSA and in patients with OSA who are not tolerant of CPAP at all. You have tried everything, you have tried all interfaces, you have tried counseling the patient multiple times, you have tried lower pressures, but still the patient is extremely intolerant to CPAP, then you may try using an oral appliance, but not the first line of management for OSA patients. Humidification. PAP devices do come with a humidifier. You can see the humidifiers here. This is a humidifier attached to it. Is it required for all patients? No definite evidence as such, but patients on a PAP device, with especially those who are requiring higher pressures, may complain of a dry throat, nasal congestion, bleeding, or sinus tenderness or hoarse voice. In such patients, you may start using a humidification to overcome these side effects. Interfaces, as I said, most commonly used is the nasal mask. Oronasal mask may be used in some patients who are mouth breathers, but the adherence and the comfort is much more with nasal masks and intranasal devices like this nasal pillow. So, if the choice of interface would be always a nasal mask or a intranasal device, which are equally effective and equally compliant the patient will be. Oronasal for very few patients who may not be tolerant of a nasal mask, or they are mouth breathers and there is a lot of leak occurring in through the mouth. If you use a nasal mask, in them you may use a oronasal mask. Some medical management that you can do is weight reduction, which should be advised for all patients with OSA. Maybe dietary, bariatric surgery only for morbidly obese patients. Patients who have concomitant allergic rhinitis, only in them nasal steroids may be used. Positional therapy in patients who have positional OSA. If it is only in supine position, you can ask the patient to avoid sleeping in supine position. Modafinil is very, very commonly prescribed to patients with OSA, but should not be the first line therapy. It should only be used in patients who have persistent daytime somnolence despite being adherent to CPAP therapy, adequate CPAP therapy. You have titrated, you have given the right pressure, still, and the respiratory events are controlled with that. Still, the patient has daytime somnolence. Only then modafinil can be an add on therapy, never the only therapy. What is not recommended in these patients? Oxygen as a primary therapy, no. I'll tell you when to use oxygen. Other agents like methylxanthines and nasal decongestants are not really recommended. So, when to use oxygen? A patient who has awake hypoxemia, suppose a patient has COPD or has obesity hypoventilation, who is hypoxic when the patient is awake also. In them, you may use oxygen. And in sleep hypoxemia, despite all the events being controlled, that is, on CPAP titration, all the respiratory events are controlled. There are no hypopneas, no apneas happening, but still the patient has a SpO2 of less than 88% for more than 5 minutes. In them, you may use nocturnal oxygen, and the target SpO2 should be 88 to 94%, not 100%. As usual in any respiratory disease, we don't want 100% oxygenation. Start at 1 liter per minute and gradually increase every 15 minutes to attain your target SpO2. So, to summarize, how do we choose the device? CPAP, as I said, is the first choice for any sleep disordered breathing, that is OSA, central sleep apnea, or obesity hypoventilation syndrome. All of them will get controlled with CPAP only. A small percentage of OHS and central sleep apnea may require other PAP devices. BiPAP, as I said, if the patient is requiring very high pressures on CPAP or has persistent OSA despite a CPAP pressure of 20 centimeters, we can switch to BiPAP. Auto titrating CPAP in uncomplicated OSAs without any comorbidities that we saw in a few slides. Flex phenomenon or a flex modification of the PAP device, it can be C flex, biflex, or A flex, can be used if the patient has very high CPAP pressures. Again, as I said, there is no definite benefit if it increases adherence or compliance. Adaptive servo ventilation, central sleep apnea with an ejection fraction of more than 45% in patients with hypoventilation and complex sleep apneas. AVAPs in patients with persistent hypoventilation or neuromuscular disorders, because it targets a tidal volume where you want to ensure that a significant tidal volume is delivered to the patient. Oral appliances, as I said, only for primary snoring and patients who are intolerant to CPAP. Humidification, preferable to use in every patient, but does not increase the patient's adherence. There is no evidence to say that it increases adherence. This is one patient I had put. I think there was a session on complex sleep apnea, complete session. So I'll skip this. A patient who is on CPAP therapy develops central apneas instead of obstructive apneas. An OSA patient, you start CPAP titration, develops central sleep apneas. Then it is called treatment emergent sleep apneas. Most of them will recover on their own. You can continue CPAP therapy for 2-3 months. All these will disappear. But if it remains persistent, then you will have to look at other devices like a BiPAP or a adaptive servo ventilation for these patients. Do we need to repeat titration in any patient? Many patients will come and say, I've been using it for 2-3 years. Why don't you repeat it and see? It is not really required. Repeat titration is only required if the patient has had significant weight loss, which happens mostly in bariatric surgery patients. Patient has lost 30-40 kgs. Only then you may need to repeat a titration to see if the pressure requirement has come down, or if the patient is continuing to be symptomatic or symptoms reappear once the patient is on CPAP therapy and continues to be symptomatic. Only then you do a repeat titration. Otherwise, just because it's been 1 or 2 years or 2-3 years and the patient wants it, there is no need in repeating a titration. It will not yield anything. So these are the suggested 2 guidelines that you should probably read if you want to know more about PAP therapy in OSA. If there are any questions, you can send it over to me. I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think that was a very concise, very simple way to put the topic, which I don't know how you have managed to cover, and I'm really hats off. I myself benefited from all that revision. It was very, very, very nice. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for that
Thank you so
wonderful talk.
much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.